Shalom, brothers and sisters. Shalom. Giving honor and praise unto the Most High, the Creator and the Maker of heaven and earth. My name is Yeshaya Yisrael of the tribe of Dan of the nation of Israel. In this particular short presentation, which is not going and definitely is not intended to be long, what we want to talk about, what we want to discuss, if we will, brothers and sisters, is the evidence of the Israelites in history. This is a part 2 of a series that we're going to be going over, and I appreciate the people who have commented on the last one, supported the last one, shared the last one. I want to state that I do not get, in most cases, on my channel, 200-300 views, but it is okay, because the goal, as been pointed out by many people in the past, is if you have reached one person, you have done your mission. And even if you don't know that you have reached one person, you still have done your mission. So, brothers and sisters, we want to continue in this particular case without any further ado. The Greeks discussed, because last time, brothers and sisters, we spoke about the Assyrians, and we spoke about the era of what happened when the Assyrian Empire fell to the Babylonian Empire, and what happened with the matter with Nabonidus and Cyrus of Persia and so forth. And we discussed a little bit, we discussed a little bit regarding the matter with the Persian Empire last time. Persia fell to the Greek Empire in the 4th century BCE when Darius III lost to Alexander in a battle of Gargamella. This has been documented historically. This is, brothers and sisters, the little horn that the book of Daniel in the Bible, chapter 8, talks about in that particular case. So, just giving, if we will, a short synopsis of what happened before we get to the state and to the content of what we're talking about in this particular case. The Israelites find themselves in the crossroads between different empires of the world. But one of the things that the Israelites are told by their prophets is that there shall be a time of trouble for Jacob, but out of it, Jacob shall be saved. Meaning, out of the trouble that Jacob will have, Jacob will be saved from that particular matter and from that particular situation. And so, in light of that, we who know and say that we are the children of Jacob, we want to, brothers and sisters, speak upon our history. We do not, in many cases, all right, want to wait until the said time of what is referred to as Black History Month. Nonetheless, we want to, in respect when that time comes, as has been done, brothers and sisters, take in respect advantage of it, knowing that people do have their ear attentive to what people are talking about in that particular case. So, brothers and sisters, for those who are in the room, shalom. For those who will listen later, shalom. For those who share it, shalom, and it is appreciated. Let us go into this particular matter. The next people to attack the Israelites were the Greeks. After the death of Alexander, there were 4 rulers. They were Cassander, Seleucus, Ptolemy, and Antigonus. Alexander died in 323 BCE. And in the year 301 BCE, the War of Ipsus had Antigonus removed and replaced with Lysimachus as the ruler of Babylon. Because in many cases, when people speak about the Greeks and what happened with Alexander, most times people say there was Cassander, Seleucus, Ptolemy, and Lysimachus, which eventually became true, yes. But before Lysimachus, there was the guy Antigonus. So we just wanted to point that out for reason purposes, if we will. It goes on to say, 2 of the 4 generals after Alexander, most important to the Israelites, is Ptolemy and Seleucus. We want to point out that Alexander's direct successor was his brother Philip, and then his child, Alexander IV, the later being killed by Cassander. So, brothers and sisters, what are we pointing in that particular matter, if we will? Is this. Alexander's son from a woman named Roxana was killed before the age of 15 by his general Cassander. It is generally believed by many that Alexander, who was called Alexander III, or Alexander the Great by some, that he too was killed by his general. Some say yes, some say no. Nonetheless, Alexander died not being 40 years old. So what we're going to do is go on and show the correlation of this history and how it coincides with the Israelites. The Ptolemy and Seleucid empires. Now, what you're seeing here on the left is the empire of the Ptolemaic people, which we're going to talk about as we go on. And what you see here on the right is the empire of the Seleucid. Now, brothers and sisters, where you see where the arrow is on the right side of the screen, you will notice that happens to just be the place where the Israelites are at, or where the Israelites at that time were. Another matter to point out is when you look on the left side of the screen, but on its right side, where the arrow is, you will see and notice that the purple is there in that particular case, where the Israelites were at. Now, when I was on the airplane and flown from Istanbul, Turkey, over into Egypt, I actually happened to see with my 2 eyes the Mediterranean Sea. And it was after going over these kind of presentations, a pretty intense and deep matter to me to see with my eyes the place that I've been talking about for so long, writing about as well, studying about even longer than that. And what we're talking in this particular case, we want to point out where you see here where the arrow is, Nabatea. The Nabateans, as I pointed out in my book, brothers and sisters, were from the people of the Ishmaelite line, the people of Nebayot, and Nebayot is the firstborn of Ishmael. So you had it to where these people were, brothers and sisters, the Ishmaelites that were going into, as you can see, getting closer to where the land of Israel was. By the time the Greeks came into power, many nations vied for the land where the Israelites were at. Let us go on. Some stuff about the Ptolemies. So let us look at this particular case here. We have here Ptolemy or Ptolemy the First, 304 to 284 BCE, noted for taking Israelites from the land to Egypt, meaning from the land of Israel. You find that record, brothers and sisters, in the book of Josephus, if you will. Then we have Ptolemy II, noted for having Israelites write the Septuagint. Now, what happened in that particular case is you had the leader, Ptolemy II. We're going to talk about him a little later on, right? He had the Israelites that were in Alexandria, Egypt, to go from Egypt after their ancestors were shipped to Egypt by Ptolemy. Ptolemy II had some of them go to the land of Israel to get their records to bring it back for the library of the Ptolemies, which became part of, brothers and sisters, the Alexandrian library. So we just want to point that out for reasonable purposes. Ptolemy III, we're going to talk about him later on as well. Ptolemy IV, he ruled the same time as did Antiochus III. Now, Antiochus III was a Seleucid. Now, that becomes important as we go along in this particular case. Brothers and sisters, when you go in your own time and you read, right, about the matter of you read about the matter of Antiochus, the king of the Greeks, right, who was a prisoner in Rome. It is speaking about the same Antiochian people that were ruling as we're speaking about in this. Then you have Ptolemy V. The Rosetta Stone found was dedicated to him. Now, for those who know, the Rosetta Stone is what they said had Egyptian writing on one side and Greek writing on the other. And by having the Greek and Egyptian writing on one particular aspect, right? What they're saying is, brothers and sisters, sorry about that. What they're saying is, in that particular case, is by looking at the Egyptian writing, they were able to sit there and using Greek, find out how to understand Egyptian. All right. So that's something we just want to point out in that particular case. Next thing we're going to get into is here. Ptolemy VI. Rome defeats Perseus, thus making ruler of Corinth. Now, during the era of Ptolemy VI is when, while he was in Egypt ruling, Perseus, as we're going to speak of later, all right, the child of Philip V, lost to the Romans. Ptolemy VII, the Israelites during this time was in battle with the Seleucids. Ptolemy VIII, Ptolemy IX, Ptolemy X, Ptolemy XI, Ptolemy XII. Rome takes control of Judea, where the Israelites were, in 63 BCE. Ptolemy XIII ruled, while Cleopatra VII also had Pompey assassinated. Pompey was assassinated in 48 BCE, and Julius Caesar died not too long after that. But what we're showing, brothers and sisters, in the text with this is how the Israelites correlates in history with the nations that were around them. All right. So just want to point that out for edification purposes. Let us go on. Ptolemy the 14th, Julius Caesar assassinated, and then Ptolemy the 15th, the last one. After this time of Ptolemy the 15th, Egypt became a Roman province when Mark Antony lost in the Battle of Actium, which is in 31 to Octavian. Octavian later on became known as Augustus, the first Roman emperor. Now, we know later on about the Roman emperors and what happened with them with the Israelites. So, yes, we want to show brothers and sisters for edification purposes what we're talking about regarding the Israelites in the history. We have shown in other presentations what is referred to as the Zenon Papyrus. Now, I'm going to type that in for those who care to sit there and look it up on their own. All right. You can look that up. Zenon Papyrus. All right. So just want to show that for edification purposes. Okay. Let us continue on in this particular case. Ptolemy the first and Seleucus the first. Now, I picked these two to show this because the subtitle of this is Why Do Europeans Not Claim This History? And I come to a surmise that the reason why is because of two things. Biblically, it does say that the nations hold a crafty council to cut the name of Israel off from remembrance. So you had a league where there were Greeks, Romans, Idumeans, who were the Edomites, Nabateans, who were part of the Ishmaelites. And even if they all did not get along, one thing that they had in common was the fact they despised the house of Israel. You understand? The Greeks were about Hellenization. And by that, they wanted to Hellenize or make Greek everything that they could, putting their name into things. As we already know, we know about Maccabees in the Apocrypha saying that the Greeks took the Israelite books and put their images inside of it. So it's not too hard to figure out what was being done in that particular case and what they were about and what they were into. In today's terminology, we can say whitewashing. We can say Hellenization. We can say forced cultural diffusion. Taking bits of your culture and saying, let's get rid of it like Antiochus Epiphanes did, saying, get rid of circumcision, if we will. When the Greeks were among the Egyptians, is there an Egyptian papyrus that speaks about the Greeks? Correct me if I'm wrong, or let me know if I need to know. Please, I don't say I know everything. Besides the Israelites, were there any other people that the Greeks were around where they tried to sit there and stop them from doing circumcision? Or did the Greeks adopt the Egyptian goddess or Set, change it to East in Greek, and later on said in English as Isis, and the cult of Isis being prevalent in Europe at a certain time? Did, brothers and sisters, the Greeks, namely in this case, I'm talking about your Seleucids that were in the land of Syria in the ancient days, did they take the gods of Canaan, referred to in Hebrew as Baalim, and call the Baalim after Greek god names? Is Dionysus, Diana of Rome, and all these others, can they be associated with the Baalim of Canaan? And if so, can it be noted and understood that Yah, Yod, Hey, Wow, Hey, the Most High, the God of Israel, was seen not only inside of the temple of Soleb in ancient Egyptian 18th dynasty as an enemy, but also seen as an enemy, brothers and sisters, to the Greeks and Romans. Did you know that the ancient Egyptians referred to the God of the Israelites in the temple of Soleb as their enemy? Did you know that the Greeks and the Romans, in their way, wanted to get rid of the culture of the Israelites? These are things that we want to point out for edification purposes. And this is no slander to any nation or anything like that. We pointed out earlier about this here. If you look, Nabatea. The Nabateans, brothers and sisters, come from Nabayot, which come from the people of Ishmael. When I was in Egypt, I noticed that the Arabian people, the Arabs or whatever like that, right? Which we do know is a mixture today between these Seleucids and Ptolemies and the Turks and Ishmael, all mixed up. But my point nonetheless is this. I noticed when I was in Egypt with my lady that they kept on trying to show and push even Egyptian gods to us and their idols. And I had to say, we deal with the laws of Musa. Musa is Moses in Arabic. Quickly, we were not offered any more idols to buy. They know what the truth is regarding that particular matter. You understand? Again, nonetheless, they hold crafty counsel. Brothers and sisters, and have taken counsel against the treasured ones of the Most High. That's why this is in part entitled, Why the Europeans Don't Claim That History. Why do they say the era, what happened, as we're going to talk about, is the silent years of history, but yet historians have talked about it? Let's go on, if we will. The matter of wars. The first Syrian war was a win for the Ptolemies. The first Punic War was a win for the Romans. The second Syrian war was a win for the Seleucids. Third Syrian war was a win for the Seleucids. Fourth Syrian war was a win for the Ptolemies. The second Punic War was a win for Carthage. First Macedonian War, no one won. They declared it a tie. The fifth Syrian War, a win for the Seleucids. The second Macedonian War, a win for Rome by Philip V's defeat. The Seleucid War, a win for Rome. The third Macedonian War, a win for Rome. Perseus was defeated. The sixth Syrian War, a win for the Seleucids, even though the Romans came in and intervened. The third Punic War, a win for Rome. The fourth Macedonian War, a win for Rome. Going over the list of these wars, let's look at it. You had, after Alexander died, the people were at odds one with another between the Ptolemies and the Seleucids. In the Bible, in the book of Daniel, chapters 11, it talks about the king of the north and the king of the south and what happened with those wars between the Ptolemies and the Seleucids. This is documented in history. This is documented in Israelite prophecy. Now, we want to point out a couple of things, if we will, right? And we want to color code that Punic War. We want to color code that, if we will, Punic War. And we want to color code this one, Punic War. Why does that become important? Because the Punic Wars were the wars between the people of Carthage, which is in North Africa, in a place today called Tunisia, and brothers and sisters, the Romans. The Romans won the first one. The people of Carthage won the second one. The people of Rome won the third one. So, brothers and sisters, we see the rise of what happened with Rome taking over places in what they call the colony of Africa. Now, whether Africa was named by or in honor of Scipio Africanus, some historians say yes, some historians say no. So we'll leave it at that. But let us look, if we will, then come back to this list in a second. Hannibal and Carthage. Now, what you're seeing here is a coin of Hannibal, right? And in this, brothers and sisters, we see what can be understood and said as black features, for the lack of a better term. Hannibal, and what is referred to as the Second Punic War, being younger than 18 at the time, went by sea, then by land, and didn't go from southern Italy north, but rather went from northern Italy south. And though he never made it to Rome, he definitely did a defeat upon the army of the Romans. What happened later on in the Third Punic War is that fact, sadly, that the Carthaginians lost. Now, the route that Hannibal took went through Gaul, as you see here on the map. Gaul is France of today. He went there across the mountains, sorry, I went too far, and then went on down in that particular case and surprised them. He was 17 years old when he did that. Why do I point that out? Because we have to remember that, not being funny, Europeans, white people, for the lack of a better term, they record a lot of history. And they do not forget. So now the average 17-year-old, looking similar, say, to Hannibal, is shown as a sodomite, talking about on billboards, I love my boo, and he's talking about another male. Ridiculous. Shown as having no understanding. And sadly, many of our people, when we see even online that somebody not the age of 20 has graduated with honors in high school or has gone on to college, you know, there are said black people that would say, what happened to that person's childhood? They needed a childhood. Do you think somebody like Hannibal that was doing what he was doing was thinking about he wants to have a normal childhood? Do you think somebody like Hannibal, who promised his uncle Hasdrubal before the age of 10 that he was going to avenge the people of Carthage on the Romans, and did what he was going to do before the age of 20, being 17 and coming down upon the Romans at the age of 21? This is the history that, as pointed out in this, that they don't want to claim, because now we can see perhaps why we are made to clap, sing, entertain. And I'm not saying be bored. I'm not saying have a good time. But at the same token, you don't want to dumb down the mind of the warrior. You don't want to gangsterize, if that could be a word, the mind of the black soldier. You understand? You don't want to have somebody who has a mind, like as stated, Hannibal before the age of 10 promised his uncle that he will avenge the Carthaginians on the Romans. And before the age of 20, he already set that in motion. No, let's tell them, Negroes, to just sit there and be entertained. That's a problem, brothers and sisters. Everybody cannot be the entertainer. Somebody got to be the educator. Somebody has to be the butcher. Everybody can't be just all eaters, because that's gluttony. Somebody got to cook. Each person has to know what role they fit in and accomplish it and do what Hannibal was like about, and being what you call beast mode. Don't let anybody dumb down yourself. If they don't see your light, that's maybe not for them to see. Let's go on, if we will. Greece and Rome discussed. Antiochus III, the Seleucid, captured Jerusalem in 198 BCE. The time before that, Jerusalem was held under the hegemony of the Ptolemies. Antiochus IV captured Jerusalem in 168 BCE. Now, we want to show that part in red. Why does that and this become important is because of this chart that we shown over here. 168 BCE, we want to show that part bold. And we want to underline it, because that was part enduring the 6th Syrian War and during the era of the 3rd Macedonian War. So 168 BCE, and I want to type this inside of the room here, is a very important year in what we're talking about, because we will have to know what is going on throughout the world for edification purposes. All right? And Perseus was defeated by the Romans. The Seleucids and the Ptolemies are still fighting among themselves. Yet, brothers and sisters, they still have enough time to fight against the Israelites. So even though they're not per se at equal yoke one with another, they still know their commonality is the Israelite, today known as the Negro, is their enemy. They still know that, even if they don't get along among with themselves. I do not come from the school of 1 West 125th Street. You understand? I come from the Old Testament camps. I remember watching on videotape when the Israelites went on the Jerry Springer show. When they went on the Jerry Springer show, Jerry Springer, this being in 1996, he had the KKK brought out, talking about black and white supremacy. Now, the school from 1 West was not known for attacking physically white people. They spoke about them being attacked, but I remember seeing on 42nd Street and on 44th Street by Broadway back in the 1990s, them clearing the way so white people can sit there and walk down the block as they teach. I remember seeing that as a teenager. But I also remember 1995, 1996 era of watching Rosewood and what the Klan did to black people in Florida. What am I pointing out? Jerry Springer is Jewish, not an Israelite. The KKK does not like Jewish people. But you know where their unity is? Is that neither Jewish people nor the KKK like the true Israelite, the so-called Negro. So they'll put their differences aside, and the Klan is not going to talk on Jerry Springer against Jewish people because they know deep down, even if they don't get along, they know who their common enemy is, and that is the true house of Israel, our people. So though Greece and Rome were not buddies, both the Ptolemies and the Seleucids, and both the Republic and the Empire of Rome all knew who their common enemy was, the house of Israel. Let's go on. Judah Maccabee was leader from 165 to 160 BCE. In the time of his leadership, the Battle of Beth Zur occurred. This war led to the institution of Hanukkah. Jonathan Maccabee was leader from 160 to 142 BCE. During this time, the Greeks lost 2 wars to Rome, and Rome won 1 war, the Punic War, Part 3, as we discussed. Simon Maccabee was leader from 142 to 134 BCE. During this time, Rome was on the scene and Greece was out the bracket. After Simon passed, his son John Hyrcanus was leader. This is the Sam Hyrcanus who is noted in Josephus for making the Edomites convert to the ways of being the Israelites. He was leader from 134 to 104 BCE. During his time is when the War of Jugurtha in northern Africa occurred in 105 BCE. This is also the same era when Carthage was rebuilt by Rome in 129 BCE, because we have to remember that Carthage lost to Rome in 146 BCE. So as we know, BCE years count down, all right? So these are just things showing a correlation with that. But when speaking about the Israelites, we're going to have to okay, know who we're talking about when we're speaking in this particular history. Let's go on. The new book cover, giving honor to the creator of heaven and earth. The book cover has been updated and is available for those who want the books. Contact Fab Aim Edits on Facebook. That is her name. Fab Aim Edits is the one who does the book covers for me in this case, if we will, to be pointed out. So you can inbox her, and she does editing with covers and all kinds of things in that particular case. Next slide, please. Greek and Roman empires. Here we see the Greek era, if we will, brothers and sisters. And here we see the Roman era, if we will, brothers and sisters. In an area in which they controlled. In the area in which they controlled. You understand? Next part. Romans discussed. The sons of John Hyrcanus were Judah Aristobulus, who was leader from 104 to 103 BCE, and Alexander Jannaeus, who was leader from 103 to 76 BCE. Now, I want to say this, and I say this in no disrespect. Do you know, and it's not to be disrespectful to any Israelite brother or sister, but did you know that there are Messianic Israelites who say that Old Testament Israelites don't know this kind of information? Somebody lied to you. I want to point that out again. I remember being asked, and I have brothers and sisters who are Messianic, very good friends and everything. But I remember being asked, do Old Testament Israelites get into this kind of subject? And I say this in due respect. Maybe you didn't read the book, Judea Trembles Under Rome, by the Old Testament man, Rudolph Windsor. Maybe you didn't read, brothers and sisters, Israelites and Jews, The Significant Difference, by the Old Testament teacher, Kohen Mikael. Maybe you did not read, brothers and sisters, things of that kind of nature to ask such a question. Sometimes, if you have a question, especially now in the days of the internet and the information superhighway, as it's called, you ain't have to ask that question or make that assumption. Old Testament Israelites must think that the history of the Israelites end with the Persians. No, we never said that. Never taught that. So these are things, brothers and sisters, that we want to point out. All right? I want to take this time out now to, on a human level, thank the lady, the sister in my life, Sarah Michaela Israel, one of the moderators, and a very beautiful soul. Much respect. Let's go on. Titus reports that Pompey was the first Roman to enter Jerusalem. And noted that the Israelites did not have what's, quote, images set up. We spoke about Pompey earlier, and we're going to speak about him before we close out tonight. The Hasmoneans, in the era of Pompey, had Hyrcanus II as their leader, but he was a ward of Antipater. So what happened here? We want to point out. The Hasmoneans were brothers and sisters, Israelites, who descended from the Maccabees. But by the time Pompey of Rome comes around, these Hasmoneans, in certain cases, were subjugated politically by the Idumeans. We must know the difference in what happened in that particular case. So let us go on in this particular case. Pompey and Herod. The time when Pompey was not in Jerusalem, we see Crassus in the temple and he stole from the temple. When Crassus died, the Israelites struck for freedom. This was put down by one named Longinus, who sold 30,000 Israelites into slavery. Pompey's friend, who was Antipater, died in 43 BCE. When Antipater died, Parthia set up Antigonus as king. Now, the people of Parthia, or the Parthians, were part of the Persians who gave a problem to the Romans. We want to point that out in history. There's a lot of history to be gained in this particular aspect. Antigonus was killed by Mark Antony. Mark Antony was defeated by Octavian. Now, this is the same Mark Antony who was the husband of Cleopatra. Cleopatra was not, for all intents and purposes, a Kemetic woman. She was not what you would call an indigenous Egyptian. All right, let's go on. Herod, son of Antipater, became friends with Augustus. Herod defeated the Parthians for Rome, and Rome set him up as a leader. So there's a lot of information that we're bringing out that if you're following along, you can see Herod, the son of Antipater, the Idumean of Edom, in a league that was made with the Romans. We want to point out, brothers and sisters, the Edomites were not the Romans, nor were the Romans the Edomites linearly. You know how we Israelites have said and understand for truth that you are what your father is. And so in being what your father is, the league and political ties between the Edomites and the Romans does not make the Edomites Romans nor the Romans Edomites. Just as much as when the Medes and the Persians, one being from Shem line, the Persians, Elam, and the other being from Japhet line, Madai, or the Medes, they coming together does not make it one empire. Politically, yes. Linearly and nationally and ethnically, no. The people of Edom, going into the aspect, if you were to read or associate as truth, the book of Joshua, when the people of Kittim, which is from Japhet, had a league with Zepho or Zepho of Esau, does not make them one nation linearly. It means they are one nation politically. So these are things we want to point out, knowing that you are what your father is. So if the men of Edom and the men, brothers and sisters of Rome, made a league, That does not make them one nation. Let's go on to the next part. Pompey of Rome. Pompey the Great entered the temple of, quote, the Jews. Pompey was killed in 48 BCE by the orders of Ptolemy the 13th, who ruled in Egypt. So we just want to point that out for reasonable purposes. The Edom situation and their history in Israel. Now, for those who are following, you notice sorry about that. Idumea. Here's the Mediterranean Sea. The Edomites done went up into the land of Israel and helped push Judah out slowly but surely. To Eliashib, the word of the king is incumbent on you. Behold, I have sent him to warn you today. Has to be defended, lest Edom should come there. Ramat Negeb. Negeb in Hebrew means the south. So from the southern part of where Judah was, you have the Edomites trying to get in. This is why we subtitled this, The History the Europeans Do Not Claim, because though this is pointed out in history, in maps, through historians, through archaeology, because the people of Petra, where Herod was from, made a hegemony into the land of Israel. But they don't want to claim this history. Why do you think of all of the biblical movies, there seems, correct me if I'm wrong, not a biblical movie made on Rome and Edom? Because that subject right there has to be noted in order to understand what happened in 70 AD, what happened in 115 AD, and what happened in 135 AD, and the suppression that was made, brothers and sisters, by Titus, then later on Domitian, and then brothers and sisters later on Hadrian. These things have to be noted for edification purposes, but shh, don't get into that history. Don't show the correlations in what happened. That the Israelites were speaking to the leaders of the Israelites, saying that Ramat Negeb, Ramat means the height of, Negeb means south, so the height of the south has to be defended, lest Edom should come there. So now when we see a biblical map showing Idumea and where they were at, then we can begin to see how that came into play. You're going to have to name who Edom is. Eyewitness to Rome's first century conquest of not Idumea, but Judea. Remember two things. David had the Edomites in subjection centuries before the Maccabees. So the Edomites were already acquainted with some of the stuff of the Israelites. How do you think later on the Greeks, who are not Edomites, knew to attack the Israelites on the Shabbat? The Greeks don't have a Shabbat. They first attacked the Israelites on the Shabbat. Who gave the Greeks that idea? Remember, they hold crafty counsel and made a tumult, as Psalms 83 talks about. Let's go on, if we will. The Herodian line. The people of Edom, namely Herod, married into the Levitical line. We want to point out that Herod married, then murdered his wife, who was a Levite. Antipater, Herod, Miriam, Alexander, Aristobulus, Bernice. This woman here, shown here, was a Levite, was an Israelite. Herod the Edomite married into the Levites. And eventually had his wife murdered. Let's go on, if you will, to the next slide. Herod, he sought a tie with Rome and status. In his life, he made sure some of the Hebrew culture was cut off and that of Greece came into place. That becomes important because Herod did everything he could to get rid of the temple that we see that Ezra and Nehemiah had built. Herod the Matter, Part 2. Antipater of Edom and Julius Caesar were friends. Herod, the son of Antipater of the house of Edom, and Julius Caesar were friends. Remember, Julius Caesar was killed and assassinated, you understand, by people like Brutus and them in 44 BCE. So now Herod, playing both sides of a fence, if you want to call it that, right? He became friends later on with Augustus. So these are things we just want to point out for edification purposes. Rome and the Israelites continued. Augustus, then Tiberius, then Caligula. Caligula and Claudius were friends with the grandson of Herod, Agrippa II. During the time of Caligula, then Claudius, we see that the Israelites in part formed what is referred to as the Sicarii or the Zealots. Now, after Claudius, you had Nero. Nero, after he was intimate, if you want to even call it intimacy, is really more so incest. With his mother Agrippina, he had his mother assassinated. What were the Israelites doing? Forming gangs. Now, I don't want to get sidetracked, but just recently, one of the most notorious hustlers, gangsters, if you will, among the quote black community was put to death this past weekend. No one is perfect. Nonetheless, the Bible talks about, be ye not exceedingly wicked, why should you die before your time? You went against your people, and as it says in Ezekiel, the people who did not good among their own people, what will happen to them? So, keep your nose clean. Next slide. Rome and the Israelites continued. The army of Florus crucified Israelites and sold Israelites into slavery. The people of Caesarea killed 20,000 Israelites, and those of Damascus killed 10,000 Israelites. Their goal was to try to get rid of the Israelites through gentrification, as will be pointed out, and what they call the Hellenos Papyrus, which is no different than when they say, well, we want to use this place for that, so we want to buy you out or get out, or we'll raise the rent so you can't afford it no more. And what are the Israelites doing then as now? Fighting among each other. And so it was easy for the Israelites to sadly get killed as now, because you're not standing up and defending one another. See, when the Japanese were put in concentration camps in World War II, It's because the American government knew that the Japanese in America will help out the Japanese. But when they invaded Grenada in 1983, 1984, they knew black people ain't going to stand up and fight for black people. So they had nothing to worry about. Because we didn't have, in many cases, like that kind of thought Hannibal had. I'm going to get back at Rome for what they did to my people. No. They decided to promote and push integration. Integration in Hebrew is the word lakud. Lakud is integration. It comes from the word lakad. It's the same word for captivity. Let's go on. Rome and the Israelites continued. Nero, then Vespasian. Michael Grant in his book stated the following. After urgent surrender in vain, Titus pressed on with the siege. He succeeded in capturing the temple, which was totally consumed by flames. Anyone able to claim a connection with the house of David was also hunted and eliminated. See, in Israel, it was never a debate on who the Mashiach was, or is, or will be. That doesn't come about until Roman ideology spilt into Israel. Who's the Messiah? Who's the Mashiach? Because see, what Rome was trying to do was eliminate the line of the Meshakim, that is to say, in this case, of the line of David. Because in Israel, if you know Old Testament culture, you would know, brothers and sisters, that the kings were anointed, the priests were anointed, and there were prophets that were anointed. So saying one is a Messiah, or in Hebrew, a Mashiach, you got to find out, is it the priest line, the king line, or the prophets? Israel ain't had that argument until Rome decided to try to infiltrate the culture of the Israelites. You see? Let's go on. Vespasian and the Titus matter. We showed this earlier, all right, over here with them carrying that out. Now, when you go to Rome, they actually have that in Rome, showing what they took from the temple. Where did they put that? So you mean before France and Britain put the stuff from West Africa into their museums, the Romans already took the Hebrew stuff and brought it to Rome? How long you been stealing from black people, man? See, you know how the phrase goes, everybody want to be the, but don't want to be the, you know what word. They want your stuff, but they don't want what you got to deal with as a people. That's what you call a fake friend. That's not real. That's not being 100. In the Apocrypha, it says sometimes people seek out a friend for their own occasion. Check your friends. Let's go on. Oh, we want to point out, this is Vespasian and Iudea Copta, or the captivity of Judea. So let's go on. Diaspora. The Minti and the Nerva ban circumcision. All right. Some historians state the Israelites during this time, from Titus to Hadrian, migrated to Europe on their own accord. We want to emphasize own, because I don't want to say that there were no Israelites in Europe, but we want to point out whether it was on their own accord or not. However, such is not the case. In Maccabees, we read, the brethren, the Jews that be in Jerusalem and in the land of Judea, wish unto the brethren, the Jews that are throughout Egypt, health and peace, that are throughout Egypt, not England. In bulk, Edom went to European places of their own volition. In bulk, Israelites went to African places in their own volition. So let's go on, if we will, brothers and sisters. This shows that the Israelites were during the Roman Empire scattered in Egypt and throughout Judea of their own accord, is what we want to point out. from Rome to Jerusalem, from Jerusalem to Ghana. The Romans came from the northern or northwest of where Jerusalem is and went south, or from Rome southeast. You see here Jerusalem? You see here Jerusalem. The Israelites, seeing an enemy stronger than them, would not run into Europe of their own accord. They would run into African places south. That's logic at that point. Next slide. Shomrei Habrit. I have much respect for the brother Mora Yitzhak Ben Dan, not only due to the same claim of the tribe of Dan as I do, but also because never in the 20 plus years I have known Mora Yitzhak Ben Dan of the congregation Shomrei Habrit, never known him to be a fake, a con, a scam, or a crook. Never. No one is perfect. But I can say of all the time I've known that brother, I've never known him to be on no flick stuff as far as brotherhood goes. And I also want to take out the time to give a shout out to the family in South Carolina, to the brothers Ezra and so forth and so on, who also, like Mora Yitzhak, never move funny style with a brother. So just want to point that out. Next slide, and we're going to close out. From Assyria to America, the 12 tribes are in derision. I can be reached at 908-587-4841. Most High bless. This concludes this presentation. Subscribe to the channel. Share the video. If you click dislike, please leave in the comments why you dislike it. And I'm open for constructive criticism. Constructive criticism. Not opportunistic. I'm upset with you, so let me use this time to try to bash you, my brother. Don't think that somebody can't tell the difference from love and opportunistic matters. So with that, I say shalom, most High bless. 908-587-4841. Shalom, Sarah, Michaela, Yisrael. And thank you for being a moderator and a beautiful lady in my life. Most High bless. Shalom. Tune in, most High willing. November 3rd, we are going to go over the matter of Israelites in the Bible and Egyptians and show some of the stuff from when me and my lady was in Egypt. On this channel, subscribe, come back 2 nights from now, Wednesday nights, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for that. Shalom.